Hola, hola. Welcome everybody to Season 3 of the Chicago Techies Podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting the voices of Chicago Techies and their experiences. This season, we'll be hearing from seasoned entrepreneurs to rising stars making their mark. We'll dive into their triumphs, their challenges, and all their unique experiences that have shaped their journeys. I'm Ceci Fischer-Benitez. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, Zimri. Thank you for joining me today on this episode of the Chicago Techies Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think you're only like the second person that I've had from that's done Chicago Blend, so I'm excited to talk about that too. But I'm already getting ahead of myself. Before we get started, why don't you tell the audience your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and if you want to share your current role as well.
Yeah, of course. So, hello everyone. My name is Zimri Rodriguez, and I was actually born and raised in Los Angeles, California. So, a little transplant over here in Chicago, making Chicago my new home. And my current role is Chief of Staff at Capitalize PC here, also based in Chicago.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. We'll get to that, but first we're going to start with some background. I wanna know a little bit more about you and what kind of at the beginning of your career. Right out of college, like what sparked your interest? Because I think you and I have similar paths. Like we kind of went into the tech route first, but I want to hear about what was your interest about joining the tech community.
Yeah, I think it's very right on the point, and that's why we have a lot of conversations between you and I,
Yeah.
because we come from the same kind of pathway, but also mission. And for me, a lot of it was I worked in nonprofits as well, and working at in healthcare specifically as well, working at the clinics. And for me, the biggest kind of barriers I saw was lack of like technology sometimes not being utilized efficiently. And so for me, that kind of all of that compiled like the underrepresented communities facing the challenges of everyday struggle and everyday life, and then just realizing like there should be better ways to get things done. So that kind of pushed me to think more outside of the box. And to be honest, I didn't think tech specifically was going to be the thing that I landed into, but they were the only place that I found was doing things differently than the traditional models that the nonprofit and the healthcare side had. So from there, I became super interested in what the tech side of things was doing, and that's how I ended up working at a health tech startup.
That's awesome. When you were in college, I mean, because I think you studied psych, right? You
Yeah.
did something completely different. That is not what
Yeah.
you're doing. but when you graduated, what were your first kind of roles that you did?
Yeah, so I've always volunteered with nonprofits. So I was working at a few different nonprofits, and they were based here in Chicago and Wisconsin. And then I started working actually at a federally qualified healthcare center right out during college. So from there, again, I was working at, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Access Community Health Network is all through,
Yeah.
there's like 13 locations here all throughout
Yeah.
Chicagoland. So that's where I was working right after college.
Was it a tech related role, or was it like
It was
community centered?
not, yeah, it was community centered as like a representative. So, like speaking with families and trying to help them get connected with the right doctor or resources. And from there is where I say, like, that lack of resources and being able to connect them to the resources that they most needed was the most frustrating thing, especially when you were the first point of contact or the only point of contact that they had to kind of guide them through those vulnerable situations. So that's what pushed me
That's
to look
awesome. I mean,
elsewhere.
it's definitely a different path, but it's really cool that you were part of it. I'm familiar with Access. I used to work in education, so I worked with a lot of families that sometimes needed resources, and the clinicians at our school would like kind of refer them to some of those areas. So
Yeah,
we had
yeah.
all of those resources at the main office to also deliver that to parents when they needed to. So I that's why I know random stuff about like community, like health and whatnot here in Chicago, but education and all. So walk me through like your first adventure kind of getting out of that and kind of exploring the tech community. Like what role interested you? Like what was your untraditional path, right, to that role?
Yeah, so like I said, I think it was mainly just that frustration that I felt working with these families. So I started looking for different, really on my path, like I said, it was psych, and I was really driven by that point of like helping people within mental health. That was big for me. But then again, working at the health clinic was there's not just mental health that is an issue. There's all of these other like lack of resources that people are facing. So I started looking at different organizations that were providing different resources, and I had applied to a ton of roles within that. And unfortunately, a lot of the requirements, especially regarding mental health, do require you to go get a master's or at least have some
Yeah.
clinical hours added in there into the resume, which I didn't have. I just had this nonprofit experience and this big frustration. So I ended up applying to this health tech startup called NowPow, based in Hyde Park. And that's where I was able to get a job as a community researcher. So there, not many people know, and not many, I don't tell many people, but I actually had applied like twice, and they rejected me the first time, and I was like, no, this is an organization that finally I feel like aligns within my goals and my mission of like connecting those healthcare providers with all of these social service agencies. And so I kept applying, kept bothering
Good.
people,
Yeah.
making those connections. And yeah, the second time I was able to be hired as their community researcher.
I love that tenacity. That's great. I mean, don't be ashamed of saying that because my well, technically, yeah, my first like big tech job, I got rejected first, and they actually reached out 3 months later after it didn't work out with the person that they hired. And at that time, I was like Groupon, still, like
Yeah,
but I'm glad that it worked out that way actually because I learned so much in that time frame.
yeah,
By the time that they came back and said, "Hey, are you still interested? This role might be open again." I was like, yes, I am. And I had already learned a lot more stuff
yeah,
that I kind of brought with me, but don't ever be ashamed of that.
yeah.
And from looking at your LinkedIn after you had that role, it sounds like you also applied for the Color Wave Fellowship.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah,
it
so
was.
I think it's funny because we have been in the same fellowships now, like two fellowships. So I didn't know you actually did that, but I think I remember now that you did, because
Yeah,
you were part of that list when we had the alumni party for Chicago. I saw your
yeah.
name on it. So yeah, and for those of you, well, let me have you explain what Color Wave is.
Yeah, so Color Wave is this program, and I believe it's a national program because they have
Yeah.
chapters with different states within different states. And essentially, the whole purpose of it is to help educate underrepresented community members on startups and the whole innovation economy. So, like, from what is a startup and what are the different series, as well as like what are VCs and what are they looking for within startups. So it
So
was
that
a
came in
great,
perfect for you, like because that
yeah,
would kind of help you solidify the path forward, right? I'm assuming.
yeah. Well, it definitely helped me gain some sort of foundation on what this a startup was. For me, I
Yeah.
think my time at NowPow was really like it was called a health tech startup, but for me, it was just like, this is just another company. But there was also an acquisition in between as well. And so that whole process alongside the color wave really enabled me to understand what was going on within the startup.
Ecosystem, yeah. So is that so what happened after, your time at that first startup? Like, where did you go next after the Colorway Fellowship?
Yeah, so it was we were acquired. I didn't technically leave NowPow. We just were acquired by
Mm,
Unite Us. So it was another health tech startup. And I think the biggest thing that drew my curiosity into even more so within startups was that we went from NowPal, which was a smaller team, and when I joined the team, there was, still conversation about growing and expanding the team even more and going into different states. But when we were acquired, we automatically went from the few states that we had to like 44 different states in the US. So for me, it went from like this small thing to now we're bringing this solution to people in 44 different states and X amount of communities within those states. So
wow.
the for me, and especially the solution that we were bringing is helping connect those providers and doctors to social service agencies. And again, for me, that was just like I couldn't grasp the impact that we were able to create because of this acquisition. So it was just like for me the thought was if this is just one startup and one solution, I can't imagine other solutions and other startups that are trying to bring different types of solutions around different problems.
Mhm.
What would it be like if we were actually able to get them to like Series C or, continue growing on that end? And then you go into the whole underrepresentation that happens or underfunding that happens with underrepresented founders, and then
Yeah.
just realizing that again there's this group of people that are being left out from bringing their solutions into the communities that they probably would like to see that solution out there. So
Yeah. Yeah, your experience definitely reflects a lot with mine. Like I spending time at Code for America doing similar
yeah,
work that it's also a nonprofit, but tech nonprofit that is providing resources and solutions to mostly governments, local governments. But it feels like we were on the same path. Like, right? It's interesting.
yeah,
And then during your time at Unitas and this startup, like you also did those fellows, like the Colorway Fellowship, and that helped you kind of understand the framework of startups. And I'm assuming a little bit of venture capital, or what was the curiosity behind venture capital? Because we already mentioned that you and I did completed the Chicago Blend Fellowship program, and for those who don't know Blend, it's a nonprofit here in Chicago that is working to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within venture capital and the startup community. So there's fellows that go through this rigorous program, education, and meetings with VCs and founders and all that. So what sparked that curiosity of the fellowship program, and what made you decide to join it?
yeah. Well, ultimately, and I think that's why it's so great to have you in this space because I think coming from the nonprofit side, it's all about like there's a lot of genuine people that care about the mission, and it's not for the money that you're in that industry at all.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, especially like I said, through that acquisition, it was very eye-opening to see, well, they've had to raise certain amount of money to get to make this impact that they're now having. And so for me, the biggest thing is that cash is king. And so, like, ultimately, if I do want to help these founders with these great ideas get into the communities and bring out all of these solutions, then I also need to understand what are the people that are investing in these companies looking for. And
Yeah.
so that drove my interest into understanding what are the questions that, and especially knowledge is power. I got that from NowPow. So I think there was that huge gap that I saw within founders not really understanding. Well, first of all, even within our community, I think we've talked about it as well, that not many people or not many of us know like what is a VC backable startup or
Yep.
business idea, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, some of us can potentially have a VC backable startup, but we don't even know what a startup is or a VC is, or see this as an alternative way to get to build your company and expand that. So I think it just stemmed a lot from that as well.
That's awesome. I was curious. I wasn't sure if it was more so about like well, I mean, because you also did you do oh no, you did Alumni Ventures after
Yeah,
or before?
it was after
After.
Chicago
Okay.
Blend. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming you liked it as much as I did.
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. I think the VC side is super interesting.
I yeah, it definitely. And actually I skipped the question because I also saw, and when I was creeping on your LinkedIn, I also saw that you did a little stint at 1871 as a corporate
Yes.
innovation fellow. So I want to hear all about that experience.
Yeah. So I think and this was before Chicago Blend. So I think what I definitely needed is to get a little bit more understanding through like the VC side of what I understood, the startup process and experience, what they meant, and the operational side of it, because I was working at a startup myself.
Yeah,
But I think I was definitely looking for more of that tactical skill of like how VCs work. And 1871 was great, a great opportunity to do that. So, like, doing all the sourcing and diligencing, like, which startup makes sense for this type of like lab. That's when I started having to like filter down and realize like, oh, VC. And that's also the part that made me love VCs, or the whole VC aspect of it a little bit more, is the fact that I had to be curious and lean into that curiosity, because depending, for example, at 1871, depending on what kind of lab that they're doing, it could be based. I worked on InsurTech and Web3, which I had no expertise in, but I had to dive into that curiosity and learn so much. And I love being able to learn about an industry that I would have never come across, but is super important. And like trying to see what innovators are in those spaces was really fun to learn about, but also you can see the impact that you can create if you are able to match up the labs with what a corporation is looking for, because then they would be able to get this opportunity, join the cohort, and potentially either gain better connections, or experience something within their own startup that they could help and be implemented based off of feedback that they were getting um, from different people.
yeah. No, that sounds amazing. I actually didn't know that they had an internship program until very recently. But for those of who don't know, 1871 is a private, like, global innovation tech hub here in the city of Chicago that has a ton of startups inside, and
Yeah.
founders, leaders, innovators that are working with hand in hand with investors, and supporters. So it's a huge deal. So
Yes.
that's really cool. More on that later from my end. But I wanna now let's go back to the BC path. So
Yeah.
now that you've done a couple of apprenticeships or fellowships, um, you also got a new job, as a chief of
Yeah.
staff for the Capitalized BC team here in Chicago. I'd love to hear more about that opportunity and kind of like what your day to day looks like.
Yeah, so this opportunity, I feel like that's a part where Chicago Blend is amazing at connecting you with people, and what you put in it, you kind of get out of it as well. So um, I was definitely using either their connections, their network, as well as the Slack. I mean, leaning onto each other within the
Mhm.
cohort. Any alumni from Chicago Blend are always open and willing to talk to anyone who's done the program.
Yeah.
So I really loved being able to just network with people that otherwise I would have never thought to reach out or to ask for help. And then actually this opportunity came across through Chicago Blend actually, and I initially had not ever thought of doing anything chief of staff related. I was looking for investment analyst role, with which a lot of the feedback was I needed more experience. So I had also been looking for probably more fellowships again to kind of
Yeah.
stack up more experience. But in between that, one of the alumni that I was speaking with, she mentioned like, did you see this opportunity? And I was like, yeah, but I don't think it's a fit for me. And she was like, well, you have all of this operational experience, you know about VCs and startups. I think you should just give it a shot. And after that, I was like ruminating on that a little bit for a few days, and I decided to apply. And we did. And surprisingly, I didn't get to meet Tessa, the funding manager for Capitalize, until this July, um,
Oh,
during
wow.
Chicago Tech Week. So even though she's on the advisory board for Chicago Blend, it was always like I had seen her, but then I would, like, when I would be looking to talk to her, she would end up leaving at events. So it was funny that I was like, this is the first time through this interview process that I got to speak with her.
That's
Have you
wild.
gotten a chance to talk with her yet,
No,
or?
actually, I've seen her speak on a couple of events in the city, but I actually haven't had a chance to like have a one-on-one either.
Yeah,
I mean, VCs are incredibly busy too, and
yeah.
they
I'm like, she
there's
just slipped by.
yeah, no, but she's incredibly intelligent. Like
Yeah,
I take so many notes when I see her speak because she's on point. I've seen her speak at a couple of events, one at 1871, and I think another one at Tech Nexus. But yeah, she's wonderful. Now, kind of thinking through your all overall VC like experience now that you know kind of more information about it, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've kind of faced through as you learned this new space?
yeah. I think part of it is that I still am trying, or at least for me personally, still trying to figure out, does it make sense to try to get more investment experience. But on the other hand, this opportunity, and that's why I was super excited once I understood a little bit more about the role, is more so, I think, of an easier step of merging this operational experience that I've gained for working at nonprofits, working at a startup. Like, everything constantly changes. And
Mhm.
I think VCs are also, sometimes they work like a startup as well, which I don't know if
A
I know
hundred
you've done
percent. Yeah.
some as well, some experience with VCs, and so like always having to or like having new processes being put in place or re-strategizing on the way that things are done. I think that all of that operational experience, nonprofit experience, alongside that startup experience have been super helpful. And then now to see it come, or like working to bring that into fruition for Capitalize, is something that I'm super excited to continue doing, because now there's, specific portfolio companies, and Capitalize focuses as well on primarily helping underrepresented and funding underrepresented founders.
Mhm.
So I love that there's a mission alignment there. And
A
so
hundred
working
percent.
with these portfolio companies is something that we're currently trying to develop, and being a part of that development is super exciting for me, because again, it's just another way to help founders and continue helping them go from the pre-seed stage to a series A, and to continue on, because that's ultimately also going to be fruitful for us as a VC as well.
Yeah. Well, no, I to go back to your earlier point, I think you're right on point. The VCs are basically founders themselves. Also, I
Yeah.
mean, they have to fundraise, they have to show up, to events, they have to network, they have to build all these relationships, and they're building their own firm. So
Yeah,
definitely agree with that. And that I think there's a lot of challenge there in like
yeah,
merging the two, not just fundraising and like deploying capital, but also like building their own business internally and their own like processes and their infrastructure. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited for you to continue to learn all of that. I think that's a great role to be in. I'm just super excited for you. Yay.
yeah. Thank
um,
you.
yeah, and now like you continue to be super involved in the community. You're working with VC Familia, I think, or the Familia
Yeah.
Foundation. You're one of the chapter leaders. Um, can you tell me more about the organization itself and kind of like what it all entails being a leader of the Chicago chapter?
Yeah, so for La Familia, we just recently launched in June. And La Familia is supposed to, the whole purpose of creating La Familia is to merge uh, Founder Familia and VC Familia together to create La Familia. And for just a little bit more context, we focus on Latinx founders as well Latinx individuals who are in VCs. So it's kind of trying to bridge the gap and bring out those two different, or what is make be considered different, but at the same time, that's why I think having it launched as La Familia really taps into one, the like Latino sentiment of like familia is such a
Hmm.
big thing for our community to leverage our family as a support and provide those resources and connections. And I think that is something that we're trying to develop here in Chicago as well. I think there's a lot of Latinx folks in the community, but I feel like having a place is sometimes, whether you're specifically a VC or a founder, can sometimes be hard to
Hmm.
find that, because even from my own experience, and I'm sure you as well, because we're both so much in the community, there's like not a specific place to find that. You can go to like Latinas in Tech, and that community in itself is amazing, but you're not going to be able to network or just find maybe those Latina founders
Hmm.
specifically. It's just a mix of individuals, which is great. I don't want to say like just surround yourself with founders and that's it. That's your whole life, because that's not it. But
Right.
sometimes you do need like that founder to founder support, and sometimes you do need to have friends that are in VCs that can give you that perspective of like, hey, I'm coming along with this obstacle, or I got this feedback, or I don't have feedback, and just being able to tap into those networks. So what I'm looking forward to is providing that space where both founders and VCs can come together and really, again, build that community and build that familia, especially here in Chicago. We're so fortunate to be in Chicago because we're so diverse. So I'm like, this is needed.
Chicago is superior to every other city. There, I said
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
But I do agree that there is kind of a disconnect in that way, in those ways of finding founder support. So I'm glad that you all are working on that, especially for the Latino community. Right now, I feel like the only ways for them to meet others is when either VCs have special events and they invite them, and Hispanic Heritage Month that is coming up, and a bunch of events are coming, but
Yeah.
or even getting that support from their current like accelerators or incubators. But other than that, there's not really like a place that they can go to. So I'm excited that you are all bringing that to Chicago as well, and that founders here that are of Latino descent can get that support. So that's awesome. Are there any cool events coming up? I'm assuming some for Hispanic Heritage
Yeah.
Month.
Yes, we have to. We did a I guess officially launched in during Chicago Tech Week, but this is going to be another like official launch we're doing in September. The dates for September 25th, so keep that date on hold. Invites and announcements around that will be coming out shortly, but yeah, we're super excited, and especially because again, there's so much momentum happening because of Hispanic
Yeah.
Heritage Month that we're excited about it.
That's exciting. I'll definitely make sure to mark my calendar and save the date for that because I would love to join.
Yeah.
And bring a couple of friends with me.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Please do.
And then just for to wrap up, like I wanna hear a little bit about your goals, your future goals and aspirations. What does Zimri want to do in the future? Like, are you considering a fund for yourself? Down the line, or where do you see yourself growing in what space?
Yeah, so I think potentially that maybe, I don't know, in X amount of years, I
Yeah.
still feel like there's a lot of learning that I have to do. So for now, I'm super excited to continue developing into the chief of staff role. I think that will definitely also, through this experience, kind of answer the question that I have of whether being on the portfolio or platform side, or if I want to continue and helping allocate money to these founders and becoming an investor myself. In the meantime, I'm looking to exploring like angel investing a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then, as always, like the whole reason why I got into this whole VC experience and startups was because I want to make sure to be the best resource I can be to any founder. So I'll continue developing those skills and how to be a better resource to them.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. I feel like you and I are aligned as well for the future. So,
We'll
um,
definitely see each other around.
oh, 100%. Yeah, you already know. But I have a now, like, for anyone that might be considering kind of going down this path to potentially, curiosity about VC or just the startup ecosystem, like, what resources would you tell them to check out? I mean, we already talked a lot about a few, but any others that you would want to highlight for people to check out if they're interested in this career path?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I think for me, like we talked about previously, Color Wave helped really gain that foundation for me to understand when they were talking about startups or Series A, Series B, what that meant. So I would say like some of those, but even VC University, any scouting programs, I know those are very popular as well. I have yet to do one that's directly just sourcing, but those are a great experience. I got that sourcing experience thankfully through 1871 because otherwise it would still be like a learning that I would have to do. But I would say any sourcing kind of programs that are out there, but also just being connected within, or at least I use my community a lot in terms of showing up and just letting curiosity like lead the way. I think that has opened up a lot of not just learnings in terms of like what are other people doing, because I think especially from coming from an underrepresented background, we don't necessarily know that VC is a path through a career. So like there's a lot of, different pathways that you can change, and
Yeah.
just like learning about different people and how they got into VC might be helpful for you as well. So
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, 100%. She said it all, guys. So make sure to write your notes on all this. I don't know. That was something.
Or put it on replay.
Yeah,
Subscribe
make sure
to your podcast.
the shameless plugs, right?
Yes.
No, well, thank you so much though for joining me today and having this conversation with me. I know it was kind of last minute, but I'm glad that you were flexible. So I'm excited for you for what's to come and to collaborate potentially in the future. So thank you for joining me today, Zimri.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Chicago Techies Podcast. If you enjoy listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. Let's continue the conversation on social media. We are at Chicago Techies on all social media platforms. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.